Hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Richard Bradford. I am a professional artist and art teacher, and today I'm going to teach you how to paint a night scene in acrylics. I originally painted this on a 5x7, but today we are going to paint this on an 8x10. Now, if you have purchased one of my acrylic paint art kits, you have everything that you need to paint this painting. You have the brushes, the paints, you have the palette, you have the canvas, and the only thing you did not have in that kit would be a cup of water. So you will need to get that. All right, today we are going to start out by painting the background area. When I'm painting, I always like to paint backward and forward. I always like to paint the distant areas first, and then bring everything forward and then finish off with all the details of the items and the landscape that is up close. So we're going to start with that today. We're going to paint our sky. And I'm going to start out, I'm going to be using this is some phthalo blue. I'm going to be using Mars black or permanent black. I'm going to be using some titanium white. And I'm also going to be using a lighter blue. In this case, it's lake blue, but any kind of lighter blue. And if you don't have a lighter blue, that is perfectly fine. You can just mix some white in with your blue. All right, so to start out with the sky, I'm going to take some of my phthalo blue and my black and a little bit of white, and I'm just going to go through and test an area. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. I'm going to test an area, and we're going to go through, and if we like it, keep it. If we don't, we can go ahead and lighten it up or darken it up however you want. But what we're going to do first is we are going to paint the darker portion of the sky, which is going to be kind of the top portion area here. And we are just laying that paint down. Now, I'm not sure if you can see it, but if you notice, every once in a while I'll dip my brush in the water a little bit. I like to have, in this situation where I'm painting a big area, just kind of one color, I like to keep my brush kind of wet, because what it does is it kind of thins out and extends my paint, and that's something that I particularly like in this situation. All right, now I'm adding a little bit of white to my black, phthalo blue, my lighter blue or lake blue, and I'm adding a little bit more white because I'm trying to lighten it up a little bit now as I move down. I need to add a little bit more white. There we go, a little bit more. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't mix super well, if I'm not getting the exact right blend that I want. That doesn't matter, because, you know, when you look at the sky, you see all kinds of things, especially in the night sky there. Distant clouds that bring some lighter colors. You might see lots of different clouds are going to bring lots of different colors in there. You might see, I don't know, stars, airplanes, the moon, all kinds of stuff that's going to add a little bit more contrast and color and really cool stuff to the night sky. All right, as I move down, I'm adding a little bit more white to my paint here. Okay, a little bit more white. All right. Because I want to, as I get down closer to my horizon line, I want it to be, I want the sky to be, well, lighter. Let's just put it that way. Now, in this situation here, I'm actually not going to have the lightest part of my sky be the horizon line. Sometimes you do that when you're painting a night sky, just because of where the, especially if you're painting kind of a twilight or the time just after the sun has set, because the sun is going to be just below the horizon line there, and it's going to be lighter there. But we're not going to do that in this case, and the reason why is because we have a moon that we put in here. So the area around the moon is actually going to be our lighter area. So we are just plugging away here and getting this area here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, as I move down now, I'm going to darken it up a little bit, because we are moving away from where the moon is. And so we're moving away from our light source, so it's going to be a little bit darker. We can go ahead and blend that in. So we got lots of water in our brush. Okay. Now we are almost to the point where we are going to call that our horizon line. I don't want my entire painting to be just sky, so we are going to probably call this area here our horizon. There we go. Now, if you notice, I'm not sure how it shows up on camera, but this is it. We've got a lighter area right here. Our lightest area is right here. We will be lightening that up a little bit as we continue to paint. But right now, we're just gonna leave that a little, really how it is. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna allow this area to dry. I don't want to right now paint over this while it's wet because I'm gonna be adding some clouds and a moon, and I want those to be separate. So if I try to paint them now while my acrylics are still wet, my paints are still wet on my canvas, it's gonna blend and really make the clouds look really fuzzy, and we don't want that. So I'm gonna wait for a minute for this to dry, and we'll come back when it's dry, and we are gonna add some clouds and the moon. All right, welcome back. My canvas is pretty dry now, so I'm going to start adding the clouds and the moon in there. And again, my darkest area is up top, and then I use my darker blue and my black, so whatever kind of blue that you have, that's fine to use. Get a dark blue in there and some black, and I mixed a little bit of white in there because otherwise it's gonna get too dark. But I have my darkest area up top, and as I gradually went down, I would add a little bit more white, a little bit more white, a little bit more white, and lighten it up until I got to the point where it was lightest. And then I would add a little bit more black and blue into my paint and get down to where I consider my horizon line. Now in this situation, it doesn't matter if your horizon line is perfectly straight. It doesn't matter because we're gonna be adding some foliage and some things in here that are going to overlap into our horizon line, so that's fine. Okay, now we're gonna add some clouds. Now, I like to use different brushes when I'm doing clouds. This one, I'm gonna use this one right here. This is a number 6 brush to start my clouds. Get a little bit of paint on there. Now, I don't want my clouds to be pure white yet. So I'm not just gonna dip it in white and start making clouds. I'm gonna teach you a little bit how to make clouds here. All right, I'm gonna show you how I make clouds. So I'm gonna dip it in, get my brush a little bit wet. I do not want my brush really, really wet because what's gonna happen then is it's just going to muddy your clouds. Okay, so I'm gonna dip it in some white, and I'm gonna dip it in my lighter blue, dip it in a little bit more white. I want kind of an off-white, light blue color for my clouds right now, okay? And then I'm just gonna pick an area, and then I'm just gonna lightly touch that area. Now I'm barely putting any pressure on my canvas with my brush here, okay? So I've got a cloud there, and my lighter clouds, my lighter colored clouds are going to be around the moon because that moon is going to be lighting them up, okay? And I'm just lightly touching, barely any pressure on these, okay? I'm just going through and adding more clouds. So, and if I feel like my clouds are too bright right now, I can add some more blue. I could even add some very little bit of black, but I don't want my clouds to be pure white right now, okay? You want to avoid that situation because you don't want to go there right now. You don't want to go to extremes on these, especially right now, because you want your colors to be kind of muted until you work your way up to that bright white, is I guess what I'm saying. Okay, got some clouds there. Now I'm going to go a little bit higher, and because of that, my clouds are going to be a little tiny bit darker. So I'm going to add a little bit of just a very small touch of my black in there. I'm going to test it out to see if I like it. I might have a little too much black. No. Okay. Maybe just a touch more black. Again, I am barely putting any weight at all on this. Barely putting any weight. And I just kind of wiggling my brush around because I want those clouds to look pretty soft. Okay. Now as I move up higher, I'm going to darken my clouds a little bit more. Ooh, that's a little bit too black. Okay, that's a little bit darker. And I can even do kind of some streaks of clouds, you know, some hints of these streaks of clouds off in the distance. Okay. And if I have areas of my canvas that I think, oh man, that blue didn't blend very well, put a cloud over it. And you can fix your mistakes by adding clouds to areas that maybe you feel like didn't blend very well. Maybe it's a little bit too dark or a little bit too light in an area. You just put a cloud over it. Again, that's why when I'm creating my sky, I'm not super concerned about making sure the blend is absolutely perfect because, you know, if I'm going to add clouds in there, I can cover some of the mistakes on that. No sense in spending a ton of time when I can easily fix those mistakes with just a few clouds, okay? So as I'm adding some clouds, I'm going to add some more layers of clouds. I'm going to add some a little bit lower as well. And the lower clouds will be a little bit brighter than they are up there, you can see. And I'm just adding clouds wherever I feel like it. Wherever I feel like clouds need to be. I'm just going through and get them in there. All right, now I'm going to lighten my clouds up a little bit as I kind of work my way in the middle here and lighten up some areas. Because this is where, again, where our moon is, and so we want to lighten this area up here a little bit and keep it lighter there. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I kind of want to, and I probably should have done this before, but I want to lighten up this area right here around the moon quite a bit. So what I'm going to do, and here's a great example of the power of acrylics. So I didn't do that right away, and so you could say, oh man, I messed up, I got to start over again. No. All I have to do is I'm just going to lighten up this area. And if my clouds start getting muddy and I start losing my clouds, I can go ahead and just paint new clouds. So the beauty of acrylics is you can easily fix mistakes. So what I'm trying to do is right now is just really lightening up the sky in this area where my moon is going to be. Because anything in that sky, those little particles and everything like that are just going to kind of start to glow in the night sky where that moon is. So that's what we're doing right now, is we're just kind of lightening up that area where our moon is going to be. Lighten up the sky there. Okay, so now our moon is going to be right over in that area. All right, now to do the moon. This is going to be a little weird for me because normally I move my canvas around, and because I'm filming and I'm not going to be moving my canvas around. So it's going to be kind of a weird angle for me. So you may have to be a little patient with me, but here we go. Now I'm going to use a smaller brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my circle really small. There's a couple of ways you can do a moon. Number one, you can just wait for everything to dry, and you can get something circular that you want to use, and you can just trace it. You can trace it in a white pencil. White pencils work pretty well when you've got paint down. You could trace it in a regular pencil. I don't push too hard. But you can trace it in whatever medium you want to use. I wouldn't trace it in paint, but you can start out and put something circular down to show what size of the moon you want, and you just trace it, and then you just fill in the circle. Or you can do it how I'm going to do it right now, where I'm just going to start small, make my circle bigger and bigger and bigger, and as I see imperfect areas, I'm going to fill those in and do that. But I'm going to pick the area where I want the moon. I'll put some white paint there, and then I'm just going to kind of build a circle out of that, and as far as big as I want on there. So the advantages of doing it my way are you don't have to track down something circular. The disadvantages are it takes a little bit longer to make something kind of your perfect moon. So we're going to do it right here. Okay. Now, this, you can start out and use your bright white, but the only problem with that is if you look at a moon, it's not just bright white, so you want to be careful. So I did start out with a bright white, but what I'm doing now is I added some black to it. I started out with a bright white just so I could make my spot there where my moon is going to be. Now I added some black to it, and I will lighten it up significantly. But what we're going to do is we are going to pretend like our moon is kind of gray. And you just make it as big as you want. And we are going to add more clouds, so don't worry if you've lost some of the clouds and while you were lighting up your sky. That's okay. Again, the great thing about acrylic, about painting really, and painting in general, is if you make a mistake, you can always paint over it and fix it. I work a lot in colored pencils too, and that's a little bit harder to fix your mistakes because colored pencils don't erase real well, and it's hard to, they don't cover each other real well either. You can blend them together, but they don't, it's hard to fix mistakes. Much harder in colored pencil than it is in paint. All right, here we go. My moon's getting bigger and bigger, and I'm just gonna keep doing this until I feel like, you know what? That is the size of the moon I want. So I'm not quite there yet. I want it to be bigger and bigger. And it's okay if you decide to do your moon gigantic, like oversized. That is fine. You can do the moon as big as you want. There's really no wrong way to. A lot of people get frustrated because they're like, well, I want to do it the right way. I'm not, and they get frustrated with painting or doing something because they want to make sure they do it right, which I totally understand. But sometimes you just got to get out there. You just got to jump in the pool before testing the waters with your feet to see if they're warm enough or cool enough for you. So my suggestion is don't worry about perfection. Just do it. All right, that's about as big as I want in this particular painting. So I'm gonna let it dry. It's probably starting to get a little bit dry because I did it so slowly. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna end up adding to my moon some brighter areas, because again, as you look at the moon, it's not just one bright light. It's got different hues, different tones on there, lighter and darker tones, not different hues. Well, I guess it might have some different hues depending on the color reflecting off it, but I want to wait until it's dry. If I tried to add a lot of white right now, bright white, it's gonna get muddy. It's not gonna be very detailed. So I want that to be a little bit more detailed. Excuse me. So while I'm waiting for it to dry, I'm going to add some more clouds around here. And now my clouds are going to be a little bit lighter because they are right in front of that moon. And I'm going to show you kind of how to highlight and brighten up areas there. But you're adding more clouds and kind of lightening up the clouds that we have around here. I don't want my clouds to go over the moon quite yet because our moon's not quite dry and I don't want to muddy it up. So we'll put those clouds, we'll put some clouds over the moon because remember our moon is behind the clouds. So I want this, again, this area around the moon to be the lightest. So I might even kind of lighten up the sky around our moon. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of gently lighting up the sky around the moon because we want to make it look kind of like it's just this ball of light that's lighting up our sky and lighting up the area around it. So all right, that might be enough. And there's different ways of doing this. If I was a smarter man, I probably would have lightened this area up quite a bit more before I put the moon down there, because it's just easier not to have to paint around the moon, but that's okay. All right, so we've got kind of a good lighter area around here. Okay, my moon is probably dry enough where I can start adding some of that wonderful white detail to our moon. Okay, you see I'm kind of doing this in a circular way because our moon is a circle. Okay, so now I'm going to add some detail. I'm going to use a smaller brush for this. I'm going to use a number 1 brush for this just because I like to dab and I want to create a little bit more detail. So I got my brush wet, not super wet, and I've just touched some titanium white there. I'm not mixing anything in it, and I'm just kind of tapping around my moon. Tapping around, making these different features on the moon. Hopefully that's showing up in the camera. But as I do that, what I'm doing is it's making it a lot more realistic. Okay, because again, our moon is not just some white ball or gray ball in the sky. It's got different tones and shades, some lighter areas, darker areas, you know, with the craters and things like that. So, all right. So I've got some bright white in there. Hopefully that shows up. And what I'm going to do now is I want to paint some more clouds in this area and paint some clouds kind of covering the moon a little bit. But in order to do that, I have to make sure my moon is completely dry. Otherwise, I'm going to muddy up my moon and muddy up the clouds. And I don't want to do that. So we're going to take a second here for this to dry. We'll add some clouds and then we're going to work on our landscape area here. All right, I think my moon is dry enough. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to add to my clouds. Now these clouds that I'm adding, Now, when I'm doing my clouds, take my brush, and this time I'm going to use number 2 brush. Get it wet, but you do not want it really wet. So wipe off any excess water. You just want it you want it a little bit more damp. Okay, and then get your white paint on there. Don't get a whole lot of white paint. And then, because it's easier to add paint than it is to take it off the canvas. So we are going to add some clouds. They're going to be kind of in front of our moon here, and these clouds are going to be pretty light because the moon is glowing through them. The light of the moon. Now, if you notice, I'm tapping in this area right here because I want to make sure if my moon is not quite dry enough that I'm not mixing, that I'm not muddying what I've already done. Okay. So I'm going to go through. Now, when I feel satisfied that I've got enough cloud cover in front, I'm going to add some clouds down here. And right now what I'm doing is I'm actually just highlighting some areas that I think clouds might be, that light of the moon is just kind of shining off of. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight some edges of clouds and things like that are kind of around the moon, make it the areas that are closer to the moon lighter. Like right here, these clouds on the bottom here, their area that is towards the moon, the bottom area is going to be a little bit lighter. So just lighting up the areas, that edges of these clouds where the moon would be, lighting up their areas. So, and if you feel like, oh shoot, I made it a little bit too light, well, you just blend it in there, or you can get some black and add it to it, but we're just kind of going through and lighting up areas that are being more affected and highlighted by the moon. See? And what it does is it makes it look more like the moon is really glowing. Okay. I'm gonna lighten up some of the clouds over here. And I'm barely using any weight on my brush. Barely using any weight. Okay. All right, when I feel like I'm about there, then what I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna start to look at my horizon right here to start working my landscape down. And I can always go back in fact, I do this frequently. I'll go through and I'll look and think, oh man, I should have added more here or done less there or lighten this area up here more. You could always do that. Okay, you can always add or take away from your painting. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is put this number 2 away and get my bigger brush out again. Make sure I've got it cleaned off, that there's no paint on there. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of create a line down here. I'm gonna use some black and then a little bit, just a hint of some green. And it doesn't matter what green you use. I'm using a light green color right now. You can also mix your own green using blue and yellow, which I often do. My brush to be more wet this time because that's probably even too much. So I'm going to add a little bit of white to that because I don't want it to look, and it probably looks super black on your screen, but I added a little bit of white to it to kind of lighten it up just a little bit. There is just a hint of green in this. And what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of creating some, I gotta lighten that up. That is just too dark still. There we go. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm just creating my distant landscape. So that could be some hills, some mountains, whatever you want. Could be flatland. That's fine. Whatever you want. And I'm not going to bring it down too far because I don't want to. I'm going to have a river in this. So I don't want to bring my colors down so far that I'm messing with where I'm going to have my river. So, and I'm just kind of painting my area where my landscape, my land meets the horizon, meets the sky. Okay, so I've got that there. All right, now what I'm going to do is I know I'm going to have some trees that are going to kind of come up here. So what I'm going to do is, and I've got some land, I've got you know a stream or a river that's kind of running through that, but I know I have some land that's going to be on either side of the stream. So I can either, if I want to, start working on my trees, or I can go through and kind of mix some more of this darker color here and then just kind of go through and bring it down wherever I think I want the land to be. You know, and I think I want my river to be kind of coming down like this around. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. So I'm just kind of right now just painting, and it's okay if I get my darker color where I want my river to be, because I can just again paint over the area. I can lighten it up. I can, you know, there is no mistake in painting, I think, that you can't fix. So and you'll see that I will definitely paint into areas where I'm going to think, no, dang it, I want river there, not land. So we're going to kind of bring some land out here, some land out here. There's going to be some waterways that are going to come through. So we're just going to kind of adding some dark color here. Get some more of my green. And it probably is not showing up on my on the video too much, but I do have some green in here, and as well as some of my white to kind of lighten up. But so I'm just kind of going through and just really just roughly kind of very roughly mapping out where my land. So I'm gonna have some bushes and some things right here. But very roughly mapping out where my land is and where my water is going to be. And as I do this, I can see, oh, you know what? I kind of like it going like this and back and forth. That's fine. So that's roughly where my water is going to be, where my land is. All right. So now I'm going to work on some trees. Okay. For the trees, depending on what trees I'm going to do, it really determines on what brush I'm going to use. So like, for example, if I'm going to do pine trees or evergreen trees, things like that, I'm going to use a very thin brush. So a number 1 would be a great brush. You can use a number 1 that has a very long. So these are both great brushes. This one is great with the longer strands on here to do lines. It's really good, but this is also a good one to do lines. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to think, okay, I'm going to get some black here, and I'm going to do, let's do some evergreen trees. So we're going to go through and do a line right here. And I'm just going to bring that down. That would be basically our trunk of our tree. Get some more black there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and I'm going to start just kind of doing lines across like this. Bring them down And I do a lot of tapping when I'm doing this because I'm just, if you notice these evergreen trees, they've kind of got layers of branches and stuff. So I'm just going to go through and tap in here. And as I bring it down, I kind of think of the Christmas tree. Look where it gets wider and wider as we get to the bottom. And I like tapping because it gives me a more natural look. I don't want to just go whoop, 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 do these lines across, because if I do that, I'm going to end up, it's not going to look real. Okay, and we're kind of going for, obviously not photorealism, but we're going for some realism here. So tap it along here, tap, tap. And I want to leave some space because I don't want it to just be this cone. I want to avoid that. So that's why that's why I leave some space in between there so I can fill it in as I go down, but I don't want it to be a cone. I want to have some, I want to have some light kind of shining between some branches and stuff. So that's a good one. Let's do another one. We're going to do another one next to it. And we can do them smaller. So like we can say, oh, we're just going to do this little one here in the distance. Little one there in the distance. And whereas the trees are farther away from us, they're less detailed and they're smaller. And we're going to do one next to it that's going to be a little bit taller. And if you'll notice, I didn't add any more black before I did this because I don't want it to be super dark here because these trees are more in the distance. And so they don't need to be as detailed. They don't need to be, as perfect. All right, now I'm going to do some like over here too. And then right now, I'm just going to kind of tap around as if these are just a bunch of trees way off in the distance there. And these can be all different kinds of trees. Could be oak trees, poplar trees, whatever. I don't care. Happy little trees, as Bob Ross would say. Let's do another tree right here. Okay, and again, I'm doing this all with a number 1 brush. Okay, take your time. One of the biggest problems I see as a teacher teaching K through 6 kids is the lack of patience. Okay, it's going to take time. You're going to do your first painting. You're going to go, oh my gosh, this is not very good, or it may be great. I don't know, but a lot of times it turns out not exactly the way you want it or how beautiful you want it, and that's okay. That's all right. It takes patience and it takes time, and I still, I as a professional painter, I still run into a lot of situations where I'm like, oh my gosh, this was just terrible. And I'll paint a painting and I think, man, I'm not any good at all. And then I'll paint another one and it will turn out to be my best I've ever done. And then I'll think, oh, okay, great, good, I've got it back. And then I'll paint another one and it's bad again. So that just happens. So be patient with yourself. Understand that not everything's going to be a masterpiece. You're going to have times where they're just amazing and times where they're not so amazing. All right, what I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of giving the idea of giving the illusion that there's a lot of trees and stuff here in the background. And I've got some, because I want it to look natural. And if it just, if you've got this, this just exact line going up, that doesn't look natural. So, adding more trees, and I'll add probably some more bushes and some things like that over here on that side. But we're gonna more trees. There we go. Okay. All right. Now on this side, let's go through and we're gonna kind of do not quite the same. I'm gonna do a little bit different technique here. Let's try with our number 014. This one, Notice it's got kind of an angle to it. This one's a great one if you're doing lines like this, but your lines don't need to be super, super thin, because this is a little thicker brush, so it's not going to give you those perfectly wonderful, beautiful straight lines. So now this one, I'm doing some different trees. So if you notice, I'm kind of doing it a little bit differently. I'm not going through and doing the individual little strands. So this is kind of a different way of doing some evergreens, and I'm adding a little bit of, it's hard to tell, but I do have some green on this brush. It's not just black, and we will bring in more green. Okay, so now what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of tapping around, because now I'm making my trees, they don't need to be super detailed, and I'm just adding some, you know, so if we've got some oak and poplar trees and all kinds of stuff like that over on this side. And some bushes and stuff. We'll probably bring some of those over here as well, so it doesn't look like this. Wait a minute, why is everything different on one side? We'll bring that over. Okay. And you just play around with it and see what works for you. Again, it may not, you may start out and go, man, this is just not looking very good. Or you may think, wow, this looks really, really good. I'm going to pull out some burnt sienna that I'm going to be using. I'm also going to be pulling out some yellow ochre, because I'm going to start to want to get some different, I'm going to start to want to make sure I get a little bit more color in here, so it's just not so black, and so my trees and stuff aren't just all these just black blobs. So I'm going to go through and actually, that's a little too bright on there. So now right here I'm doing as if this was a different type of tree. And I'm not sure if you can tell or not, but there's definitely a color in this. So as the trees and bushes are closer and stuff, we're going to add a little bit more color. We don't, remember this is a night painting, so we don't want the colors to be just these really bright, vibrant colors that just don't look real realistic. So I'm going to add some over here too. Oh, paint is moving a little bit too much. Okay, I'm gonna put some the distance there. All right, now I'm gonna mix my own green here. Because I only have one color of green in this paint portfolio that I have here. So I'm going to mix my own green. This is good because a lot of times what this does is this will give you a different hue, which allows you to bring some variety. And what I'm doing now is I'm kind of touching some areas and some more bushes, things like that. So it's giving it more variety in color, because again, we want this to make this kind of look somewhat real. Okay, and I'm going to be doing that here as well too. I'm going to be adding some color to my land, but right now I want to figure out exactly where my river is. So I'm going to go back to my bigger brush here. This is my 1/2 inch brush. If you have an inch brush, that's better. The bigger the canvas that you have, the bigger brushes you'll probably need here. Okay, I'm going to go back to my phthalo blue, go back to kind of my night sky color, really. And I'm gonna do my river here. Probably should have started with a smaller brush there, but I'm gonna go back and forth, figure out where my water is going, and then this is a little a little too, that blue is a little too kind of bright blue, so I'm gonna kind of dumb it down with some black there. Yeah, that's better. And some water here. Okay, mix some more in there, get some more blue, get a little bit more white in this. You'll notice as you paint, the more you paint, the more white you use. You use a lot of white and a lot of black, a lot more than you probably think you would use. So just remember that when you are painting, you can never buy a big enough container of white. If you do a lot of painting, you could probably buy a gallon of white and I would go through it in probably less than a year. All right, so again, what I'm doing right now is I'm not doing a whole lot of, I'm not doing details right now. I'm just figuring out where my river, get a little bit more sure about where my river is gonna go. So that's what I'm doing right now. I don't need to be super detailed right now, and I'm not, as you can see. I'm just getting paint down where I think some good river areas would be. Okay. Now I'm gonna bring some more of my land out as I make more details and stuff in there. Okay, so now I have a better idea of where and how I want my river to be. If you have white areas showing, you can go through a little bit more paint, get those areas covered. All right, now I'm gonna work on doing my land in here. Again, I'm gonna use some black, some green. I'm gonna start out dark and then I'm gonna lighten up areas. I like to kind of do it that way. Get my darker areas first, and then I'm gonna lighten up and add more color as I go along. So, let's see here. We've got a lot of paint on there. So, it might be a little too light. So we're gonna darken that up a little bit. Okay. All right, so now what I'm doing is I'm trying to kind of define these little inlets and outlets of where the river has created different inlets and outlets along here. All right. A lot of times I just kind of let the paint decide where it wants to go, what it wants to do. You know, and sometimes I put stuff down, I'm like, you know what, that doesn't look very good. I don't like that. Okay. So I'm starting to get this a little bit more defined on my river. Stop, take a look at it, think, you know what, I don't like that area, or I don't like this area, or, you know, I need to extend my land out here a little bit more so it looks a little bit more natural. Okay, that looks a little bit better to me. Okay, Now I'm going to start adding, or start lightening up this area here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of my green, some of my yellow, lighten up that green, maybe some white, yellow ochre, and I'm going to kind of tap lightly around areas that I think might be kind of grassy or mossy. These edge areas here. And I don't know if it's shown up very well, but this is definitely a lot lighter than what we've been working with as far as these colors go. And what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to add some variety to the land. And as I see areas, I think, oh, that'd be a great bush, or that's starting to look like a bush, I might turn it into a bush. But right now, kind of what I'm doing is just adding a little bit of green here and there to lighten up the land a little bit. Okay, so I've got some there. I feel like there needs to be some bushes over in this area here. So, but we're gonna lighten up some of this right over here because this is closer to us. Again, just lighten. So let's do some bushes right in here. Let's do some bushes right over here too. And notice I'm just tapping to create the idea of bushes. Okay, I'm just tapping it. I'm not going through and drawing the outline, the bushes and stuff. I don't need it to be super detailed right now. We don't need that. We don't want that. Okay. All right. And I'm going to add a little bit of blue to my green because we got a lot of blue light. So now again, what I'm doing is I'm just changing my colors a little bit here, a little bit lighter, and I'm just tapping around to kind of give some detail to my landscape. And each time I get a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter. And then at some point I want to let it dry, because if I do too much and too much tapping around these areas, what's going to happen is it's just going to muddy it up. When I say muddy it up, it means that you're not going to see any details. It's just going to be this blob of brown, gray, whatever your dominant colors are in there, and you don't want that. All right, this is an area here where it's like the river's maybe kind of dividing or turning. What we're going to do is we're going to just lay down kind of a base. Let's get a little bit darker in here. There we go. We're going to add some branches and some reeds and grasses and stuff in here. But right now we're just going to kind of tap around with different colors. Using different colors is great on this, because then when you start to do the grasses, if you have a base with a lot of different colors in there, it gives it a more natural feel, a more natural look. Okay. All right. Yeah, some of these areas are pretty dry, so we're going to work on adding a little bit more color and lighter. And I'm going to give it kind of a blue tint, bluish tint. Some of these areas here. Where the moon is hitting it. Again, I'm just tapping. I'm just picking some areas where I feel like some bushes or the grasses would be more highlighted. Okay. All right. I'm gonna fix this area right here. I really don't like that. I don't like the way that's looking up. So I'm going to change my horizon a little bit. And here's how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get some black and I'm going to create some mountains in the distance. Or some hills. Let's see. There we go. Like that a lot better. It just seemed a little too plain. There we go. All right. And now what I'm going to do is I'm using some of that black and I'm creating some shadows. For some reason I got a lot of blue in there. Must have touched the blue. All right, we're going to use some black and we're just going to kind of tap around in here. Make some shadows and I'm using my finger to kind of blend it in a little bit. And the reason why I'm doing this is that because we've got a light source. We've got the moon there and it's, you know, there's going to be shadows from these different trees and these different things that are over here. So that's what I'm kind of doing right now, is kind of highlighting some of those shadow areas. And then along with the river, you know, on the other side of these grassy banks right here, it's going to be darker. It's going to be, got to create some shade in there. So that gives it a little bit more realistic effect here as we kind of create some shadows. Okay. That's enough on that right now. And as I tap around, I say that's enough and then I keep doing it, but so I'm tapping around these different areas, creating these different shadows and stuff. Just brings a little bit more texture in it. Okay, let's work on our water here. Okay. We're gonna create the reflection of the moon in there. But we're also gonna lighten up our water in different areas. We're gonna bring a little bit more good variety to it. So we're gonna go through here. So lighten up some areas, darken up some areas. we're gonna play with our water here a little bit. Because the water is not gonna be, if it's just all one color, that's just really boring. You notice as I'm doing this, so I put some good white, I put some white into my paint here, and in this middle area here, I'm kind of lightening it up because we want the reflection of the moon to be in there. So that's gonna look really good. And if you had trees over closer to the water, you could do reflection of the trees, and in this situation in the night, I would just darken up some areas. But all right, so we're starting to get a little bit more what I want in terms of, I don't want my water look, but I want to create some dark areas too. So with that, we're gonna darken up some areas. Let's see here. I might add some brown in here too to give it a little bit more variety of color. Brown in this area here, I think I'm going to do that. But we'll do that in a little bit here. I'm going to start to work on my reflection. Now the reflection can be kind of hard because you're really doing kind of lines, and so it's sometimes you can get frustrated and go, oh man, these lines just aren't working out. They don't look realistic. They don't look very good, and that's okay. Again, any mistakes that you make can be fixed very easily with paint. Okay, so I'm going to use my this is really a number 1 with the longer bristles on there, and I'm going to get some white on it. In this instance, I do want my brush to be kind of more wet than normal. Okay. Now, normally I would turn my canvas, but for the purposes of what we're doing here, so you can see, I'm just going to start adding some lines, very, very faint lines, right lines, and I want them to be kind of straight. So there we go. And I'm going to get my brush pretty wet because I don't want to push down hard, because I want to keep these lines pretty thin. Okay. And then I'm just adding more. My wet brush there. And I want my brightest areas to be right in line with the sun. And that can be somewhat difficult when you're going, oh man, did I mess it up? Did I get it? Am I too far to the right, too far to the left? You can use a ruler and just put it over along here. I wouldn't put it over the area where you're painting, obviously, but you can put it down alongside the area you're painting. And what it does is it gives you a gauge, because you can see how far away from the ruler you are. So if I have a straight line right here, and I'm keeping that same distance as I go down from my, go down the painting, and I'm keeping the same distance from that straight line, then that means I've got a pretty straight line myself that I'm working with. So, and again, I'm just kind of going through and creating some white lines, so you can start to see we've got this kind of reflection of the moon in there. All right, I'm going to switch brushes here. I'm going to use my brush that I used over here. It's my it's my 1/4 brush. It's got a nice edge on it, kind of a sharp edge. So I'm going to get a little bit of white on here. Okay, and I'm going to gently just kind of bit more. And I want to kind of figure out, okay, where do I want the, do I want to create kind of the shape of the moon with this? And what I mean by that is it starts small here and then it kind of works its way and does kind of a circular pattern in the water. You can do that, which I'm going to try to do. Or you can just kind of just use lines that are kind of what they are right now, which is really just the same distance apart. But what I think I'm going to do is just kind of, I'm going to see what this tells me to do. Again, I'm just adding a little bit more, a little bit more. A little bit more, a little bit more. Kind of letting the painting tell me what it wants. And also, I'm going to kind of lighten up some other areas, get some white, but not quite as bright as my normal white, and just kind of like lighten up some areas where maybe the water is, flowing and stuff like that. So, all right. Okay, I think that's good so far. Now we're going to kind of work on our edges over here. So I'm going to get some brown going here. My colors and maybe create like some shorelines. Let's see, I guess is like, so maybe some areas where the water isn't quite as high as it used to be. So I'm just gonna create some shore. Okay. All right, and I'm still seeing this looks a little bit muddy in here. So I'm going to work on this area here and bring in a little bit more color into our bushes and branches and stuff. And so I'm gonna kind of like, I got some yellow and I'm gonna tap on some areas just to make them a little bit brighter. As if the moonlight is reflecting off of and kind of highlighting the color of our bushes and branches and stuff. Yeah, I'm liking that a little bit more. Yeah, that's breaking up the green. And again, I'm just using some medium yellow, and I'm not putting a whole lot of paint on my brush, and I'm just kind of tapping it around where I feel like we need some variety, where we need to lighten up our colors a little bit here so we don't have this muddy appearance. Okay. All right. Now let's work on this area here. We're going to add some reeds. So I'm going to take some green. I'm going to use kind of a light color. Maybe this might be too light, but yeah. I'm going to create some, and we're going to do different colors of reeds. So it's going to be our first color. This is the one that's kind of, and it doesn't matter if you start light, start dark. It doesn't matter. You're going to change it up. So I'm just, these are very light, but that's okay. And I can even use that, and I can go over here and create some reeds also, sticking out a little. But we're pretending like this is kind of a shoreline of the river that we're taking a picture of this beautiful scenery. And so I'm gonna use some bright colored reeds going in there. And see, it already looks really good because you've got dark colors already in there. You've got some dark contrasting colors in there. So now I'm going to go through it again and just kind of do, I added some burnt sienna to my green and yellow. So that's a pretty color. And we're going to add this in here. And I'm just using the edge of my brush to kind of create this nice line. See, I want my brush to be as thin as possible. And you only get a couple of streaks on there before the bristles in your brush start to widen out. And then so I'll show you when I'm mixing my paint and I get my paint on there, if this was my paint here, I'm doing this both sides to make sure my bristles are back into a tight line, tight, almost a knife. So, all right. If I think, oh, you know what, man, I added too many dark colors in there. Well, just lighten it up. And then, and just add some light colors. Yeah. And then I can even turn my brush around, and I can do it this way. Sometimes if I want them at an angle, I'll turn my brush around. So like this, I'll turn around and I'll go up. And my arm naturally wants to go this way, so I just do it like that. All right. There we go. And I feel like we should have some of those bushes and reeds over here as well. So I'm going to do some over in this area here. And you know, you're not going to get a whole lot of good detail and stuff because again, this is a nighttime. It's a nighttime piece. So you're really not going to get a lot of detail and contrasting beautiful colors and stuff there, but you do want to make sure that you do have a good contrast in there. Otherwise it just tends to muddy things up and you don't really see any details in there. We're going to create kind of a bush right here. Okay, we are about done here. And you can play around with it as much as you want. You can lighten up things or darken up things, but this is pretty much how it works. And a lot of times what I'll go through is I'll get done, I'll look at it and go, you know what, I need some more things here, I need some more things there. That's okay to do. You know, you might go through and say, wow, you know, dang it, I need some more shadows right in here. Or maybe I should put a rock over in here, and that's okay. You can do that. But one thing I encourage you to do is know when to stop. And that's a hard thing when you're painting, especially when you want things perfect. You got to know when to stop, because it's easy to just keep going and going and going and going and going. I mean, the reality is a painting may never be finished, but that doesn't mean that you don't stop painting it. You know, you got to know when to stop. Also, as I'm looking at this right here, when I see it looks kind of still a little bit muddy in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some black, and I'm going to add some black reeds. And what this does is this just creates reeds that look like they're in the shadow, breaks things up a little. This is a really good way to unmuddy areas. When I say muddy, it means that the colors are just blending in so much you can't see details. So by adding some black reeds or black grasses in here, it really, if you can, I don't know if you can see it, but it really kind of breaks it up and makes it look easier to see the different colors and the different shapes and stuff in here. But there you go. That is it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you followed along. If you did, please like and subscribe. And again, I have my acrylic art paint kits. They're available on my website at richardbradford.com. If you like this, tell others about it, and I will ship my art kits anywhere. Thank you. Bye.